Greetings from Salt Lake City. I hope you're enjoying JNUC 2022. My name is Dan Snelson, and I am a senior system engineer with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are frequently called Mormons because of our belief in a volume of companion scripture to the Holy Bible called the Book of Mormon. Let's talk about your internal beta test program and invitation-only betas. Here's our agenda. We'll start with a 4.5-minute recap of the JNUC 2019 session. Then we'll discuss why you should consider implementing invitation-only betas in your environment. Next, we'll look at a high-level overview of invitation-only betas and spend the bulk of our time configuring the solution. I'll share some real-world examples along the way, and we'll finish off with some resources. Let's begin with a 4.5-minute recap of the JNUC 2019 session. We started out by reviewing the three great motivators for beta testing: fear, duty, and love. If the word love makes you uncomfortable, substitute the word professionalism. Professionals perform their jobs when they feel the least like doing it. If we're only motivated by fear, we'll only test policies because we're afraid what may happen if we don't test policies. When we're motivated by duty, we test policies because it's our duty to test policies. And after all, we are responsible administrators, and responsible administrators perform all their job functions as assigned because that's the duty of a responsible administrator. However, duty has the same key limitation as fear. When the instrument which causes the sense of duty is no longer present, the motivation quickly stops. For example, while we may feel a duty to test all of our policies, there's a group of developers who have local admin rights, and they auto-update Microsoft Office all the time on day one, and they haven't reported anything bad about the new version of Outlook. So I feel no sense of duty to test it with a wider audience. I'll just push it out. No sense of duty, no motivation to test. When we're motivated by love, we test policies because we love our users. We love what our organization is trying to accomplish, and we don't want to hinder its progress due to a lack of diligence on our part. We actually love to test. We love feedback. We love finding out something didn't work for a use case we hadn't thought of ourselves. Now, the reason why love is at the top is because it is the top. Love is the great self-sustaining motivator. Because I love my users, especially my opt-in beta testers, I don't want to slow them down in their primary job functions. None of our opt-in beta testers are paid to test. They all have real jobs. We leave the dedicated testing nonsense to the Microsoft Windows side of the house. Now, if you don't have any users worthy of your love, hopefully, as they opt into your internal beta test program and you get to know them, you will begin to love them. For the nuts and bolts of the solution, in a nutshell, we leverage the Jamf Pro API to modify a pop-up menu extension attribute to one of three values. Alpha is only for your Macs and VMs. In fact, you may decide you don't want to classify your production computer as alpha, just to make sure you don't break anything on your production Mac. Beta is just for your immediate team's computers. After you've tested your policies on your alpha machines, it's time to have your immediate team confirm all is working as expected. Gamma is for all other opt-in testers. This is kind of like how Led Zeppelin released their song, Houses of the Holy, on their 1975 Physical Graffiti album, not on the previous album of the same name. Your opt-in beta testers will have their Jamf Pro computer records assigned to Gamma. Here's a QR code for the JNUC 2019 session. Let's take a look at a couple of demos. Our first demo is based on the 2019 session of having users opt in to your internal beta test program via self-service. And our second demo is of a recent change we made to prompt users monthly to opt out. because our beta test program has been too successful. This demo is based on the 2019 session of having users opt in to your internal beta test program via self-service. At the church, we call this self-service the Workforce App Store. Initially, the testing category displays a single policy to opt in. The user clicks opt in, and the Jamf Pro API is leveraged to set a pop-up menu extension attribute to the value of gamma. The user is welcomed, and the default browser is opened in the background where they can join a private Microsoft team. Finally, self-service is automatically refreshed to show the user the current testing policies. So, that's how users can opt in to your internal beta test program via self-service. At the church, anyone can opt in or opt out at any time. This demo is of a recent change we made to prompt users monthly to opt out because our beta test program has been too successful. We had way more than 10% of our users as beta testers, and when we prompted them to upgrade to macOS Monterey, they did, even though many of them shouldn't have. They'd swing by the help desk with an issue, and the help desk would inform them that they had previously opted in, which, of course, they didn't remember. Using Bart Reardon's Swift dialogue, once each month, users are reminded that they've previously opted in, and we make it easy for them to opt out. This demo is fast, so don't blink. Here we go. So that's an example of prompting users to opt out of your internal beta test program via self-service. Again, as a reminder, at the church, anyone can opt in or opt out at any time. Let's now discuss why you should consider implementing invitation-only betas in your environment. As previously mentioned, at one point, we had way more than 10% of our users as beta testers. And that's because we allow anyone at any time to opt into our beta test program, which I believe is still the correct approach. As a result, we're now in a no news is good news feedback loop. I think this is fairly common for mature solutions. Normally, they just work. So you end up with lots of testers, but not a lot of detailed feedback for routine testing requests because normally they just work. What do you do when you have a high-interest pilot, like replacing your endpoint security software? Who isn't going to opt into your beta test program if they can replace your AV software with something else, with anything else? Or a highly sensitive pilot, like implementing privileged access auditing. For this type of testing, we feel that invitation-only betas is the way to go. These are your elite testers, the Randys and the Patricks of your testing program, who have repeatedly proven themselves to provide detailed, timely information. Not only do you want feedback from these individuals, you need it if your pilot is going to be successful. Let's look at a high-level overview of invitation-only betas. Here's a high-level overview of invitation-only betas. This workflow purposely includes built-in checkpoints, and the ball will naturally go back and forth between you as the Jamf Pro administrator and your elite beta testers. Step number 1 is for you to invite specific computer records to participate. Once invited, users will receive prompts inviting them to request access. Step number 2 is for your elite tester to request access via self-service. You want to confirm they're reading and understanding your expectations for this pilot. After your elite tester has requested access to the pilot, a Jamf Pro administrator completes step number 3 by granting approval. Once approved, users will receive prompts inviting them to enroll in the pilot, which is step number 4. Also, when piloting endpoint security software, step number 4 is where the current offering is uninstalled. Step number 5, install, can be automatically handled by a Jamf Pro policy execution, or the elite tester could manually install via self-service. Let's take a look at a demo of the end-to-end workflow for invitation-only betas. Let's look at the end-to-end workflow for invitation-only betas from the perspective of both the Jamf Pro administrator and your elite beta tester. This demo is just the invitation-only workflow. The extension attributes, smart groups, and policies were previously configured and tested. During this demonstration, we'll swipe back and forth between the macOS desktop, the elite beta tester's perspective, and the Jamf Pro web GUI, the Jamf Pro administrator's perspective. Let's begin. Here's the perspective of our elite beta tester. And here's the perspective of the Jamf Pro administrator. Step number 0 is for the user to opt into your beta test program. We see here that testing level is blank. Returning to self-service, which we call the Workforce App Store, the user opts in and is then directed to open Microsoft Teams. Now it's time for the Jamf Pro admin to invite the computer to the pilot. While viewing extension attributes for the computer record, click Edit and change the pilot status to Invited. Then click Save. Looking at the Jamf Pro dashboard, we'll observe that we have one computer in the Invited Smart Group that is waiting to check in to display the RSVP message. Switching back to self-service, we can observe that the policy is pending, but let's hide self-service and use Terminal to force a check-in. In Terminal, we'll force a check-in and then observe the message. The user is prompted to RSVP and then does so in self-service. A confirmation message is displayed letting the user know their request has been received. Switching back to and refreshing Jamf Pro, we observe that there is now one computer which has requested access to our pilot. We'll edit the computer record and change the pilot status to Approved. In the Jamf Pro dashboard, we'll observe this computer is now waiting to check in to display the approved message. We'll again hide self-service and use Terminal to force a check-in. The user has now arrived at their most anticipated step, removing your current endpoint security software. Again, switching back to and refreshing Jamf Pro, we observe that there is now one computer enrolled which is waiting to install the new software offered by your pilot. In this example, our elite beta tester uses self-service to install the new software, but you could have the policy auto-execute at a recurring check-in. Switching back to and refreshing Jamf Pro one more time, we observe that there is now one computer which has installed the new software offered by our pilot. As a bonus, you can allow your elite beta testers to leave your pilot via self-service by removing the pilot software and resetting the status of your pilot extension attribute so that, in this case, your default endpoint security software is auto reinstalled. Switching back to and refreshing Jamf Pro for the last time, we observe that there aren't any computers in our pilot-related smart groups, and all of our pilot-related policies have been executed with 100% success. So, that's a look at the end-to-end workflow for invitation-only betas from the perspective of both the Jamf Pro administrator and your elite beta tester. Now that you've seen an overview of invitation-only betas, let's work on the configuration. For invitation-only betas, we'll need to configure the usual suspects. But before we do, let's discuss your preferred configuration approach. Ultimately, all of our policies rely on smart group membership. One approach is to leverage the Jamf Pro API to write values to an extension attribute, which immediately changes smart group membership. A more common approach is to rely on an inventory update to read the value of a client-side breadcrumb. Writing values to the Jamf Pro API is fast, at least 37 times faster in my testing as I prepared this presentation. But there be dragons. This approach requires global scope API credentials on clients. And the best Jamf Pro provided at the time of this recording is obfuscation at best. Leveraging the Jamf binary to update inventory and read values into an extension attribute, which then updates smart group membership, is much safer, but slower. You are each invited to talk with your Jamf representative about your use cases, which could benefit from being able to securely and simply leverage the Jamf Pro API client side. For now, it's best to rely on an inventory update to read the value of an extension attribute to manage smart group membership for all of your users. But if your opt-in beta testers are trustworthy enough, you may find leveraging the Jamf Pro API an acceptable risk. Or not. To start our configuration, we'll need at least one extension attribute, and you'll probably want both. More on that later. For the name of the so-called API extension attribute, use the full product name followed by the word pilot. For input type, specify pop-up menu. For the choices, enter the displayed options, which we previously saw in the demo. For the name of the so-called recon extension attribute, use the full product name followed by the words pilot plist to help you remember that this EA is populated by reading the value of a client-side plist. Basically, the EA script performs a default read of the key you specify as a script parameter in a Jamf Pro policy. Let's look at a demo of creating a template API pop-up menu extension attribute. Here's a demo of creating a template API pop-up menu extension attribute for your upcoming pilots. Navigate to Settings, Computer Management, Extension Attributes, and click New. Enter Template Pilot for the name and enter a description. Select your preferred inventory display option, then select Pop-up Menu as the input type, then, one at a time, add each of the 5 options, clicking Save after each addition. When you're done, click Save. Now we have a template API pop-up menu extension attribute for our upcoming pilots, which we can clone and rename based on the full product name. Here's a demo of uploading the Recon extension attribute for your upcoming pilots. On the left, we've navigated to the wiki on GitHub. On the right, we're logged into Jamf Pro. Navigate to and download the desired extension attribute. Adding XML to the end of the save file. In Jamf Pro, navigate to Settings, Computer Management, Extension Attributes, and click Upload. Specify a desired inventory display option, and then edit line number 7 using the reverse domain name notation appropriate for your organization. Please note, you'll use this same file path in Property List Writer, which we'll demonstrate later on. Finally, click Save. Now we have a Recon extension attribute for your upcoming pilot, in this case, Jamf Protect, as shown on line number 8. Before we move on from extension attributes, allow me to make a case for using both the so-called API extension attribute and the so-called Recon extension attribute. As a reminder, here's a description of both. Even if you're not going to leverage the Jamf Pro API client side to modify what I'm calling the API extension attribute, the pop-up menu EA on the left, you'll still want this extension attribute so you can quickly categorize computer records in Jamf Pro, or use the MUT to upload a CSV of every serial number you want to invite. If you choose to only create the Recon extension attribute to read the plist value, for example, how will you first invite a user into your pilot program? Or if you don't want your C-level users to have to go through the entire workflow, wouldn't it be nice to quickly assign them to the approved stage of the workflow? So even if you're not going to leverage the Jamf Pro API client side, my recommendation is that you use both extension attributes. Enough talk about EAs, let's move on. Let's talk about scripts. If you're planning on leveraging the Jamf Pro API client side, you'll add the extension attribute update script and modify both the salt and passphrase values, and then populate the parameter labels. Please see the wiki for a link to the portion of the JNUC 2019 presentation which covers configuring the extension attribute update script in greater detail. And please be aware of the risks associated with leveraging global scope API credentials on clients. I again invite each of you to talk with your Jamf representative about your use cases, which would benefit from being able to securely and simply leverage the Jamf Pro API client side. The safer approach is to leverage Property List Writer to leave a breadcrumb client side whose value is read when the computer's inventory is next updated, based on the extension attribute we previously created. You'll add property list writer script and modify file path using the reverse domain name notation appropriate for your organization, then populate the parameter labels. In a nutshell, the script writes a key value pair as a string to the plist you specify. While this is a slower method, it is much safer. Let's look at a demo of adding property list writer to your Jamf Pro server. Here's a demo of adding property list writer to your Jamf Pro server. On the left, we'll navigate to the script on GitHub. On the right, we're already logged into Jamf Pro. In Jamf Pro, navigate to Settings, Computer Management, Scripts, and click New. We'll copy and paste the script name. Then specify a desired category. Back on the GitHub side, we'll click the Copy Raw Contents button, paste, and then edit line number 31 using the reverse domain name notation appropriate for your organization. Please ensure this is the same file path you specified in the property list reader extension attribute, which was previously demonstrated. We'll populate the parameter labels. Finally, click Save. Now we have the property list writer script, which we can use in Jamf Pro policies to leave client-side breadcrumbs. Regardless of which extension attribute route you go, your smart groups are named the same. We'll need 5 smart groups, each named based on the value of the extension attribute created earlier. As devices are evaluated into and evaluated out of the smart groups, we'll observe the count progressing from left to right. Please see the wiki for the criteria used in defining each smart group. And here are the policies. I found that a hybrid naming convention for the policies worked best. Policies are named based on the workflow phase and what the policy actually does. Again, please see the wiki for detailed information for each policy. Well, that's it. Here are some resources. Here's a link to the wiki where you can find detailed information, including the screencasts used throughout this presentation. If something goes sideways during your implementation, or you discover a bug or have a feature request, please create an issue on GitHub. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of JNUC 2022.